What's going on, drummies? It's Artie here. Today we're going to talk about chained maces. Hey Lucy, stop walking around up there. God. So this video is actually a response to a question somebody had on one of my videos, and it was not a question regarding the actual content of the video. It was actually more of a generalized question, and I felt that this was actually relevant to a lot of drum majors. So Phantom 2003 actually asked a question about mace chains, asking that if you have a mace and the mace chains have become loose, is there a way to get the mace chains tightened on the mace shaft to be able to be almost like brand new? Phantom 2003, that is an excellent question, and that's actually a struggle that I had when I first purchased my first mace. I did have mace chains on my first mace, and I did go through the problem of the mace chains becoming loose. Now, my answer to your question of is there a way to tighten your mace chains back to their original tightness? Yes, there is. And no. Now, mace chain maintenance is going to be based on two factors. The first factor is the overall construction of your mace. Is your mace made of fiberglass or is it made of wood? Where did you purchase your mace, and who is the manufacturer of your mace? Because a lot of times, depending on how your mace is constructed, will depend on the mace chain maintenance. Second is the overall age of your mace. Because if you have a mace that's really old and it's gone through a lot, sometimes just the overall normal wear and tear that your mace will face over the years of usage may affect how much your mace is going to be able to be restored, how much your mace chains are going to be able to be tightened to an extent. Because eventually your mace chains are going to be stretched beyond use. Now, a lot of the drum majors that are watching my videos are probably from high school, and a lot of times they use the fiberglass American mace. Now I'm going to use a Premier mace as an example. My Premier mace is actually fairly old, however the chains are still pretty tight on the mace. Now when you first purchase your fiberglass mace from Peacock or wherever, the way you can tell the tightness of the chains on your mace is just by slapping the mace. As you can see, the mace chains are pretty wrapped. As you can see, the mace chains are actually wrapped pretty tightly on my mace. You don't hear a rattle from the chains. That's ideally where you want your chains to be. That's ideally the tightness of the chains that you want on your mace. Now I have my Peacock American mace, and this mace has been through a lot. I've actually tightened this to the point where they can't be tightened anymore, but you can actually hear the chain rattle. And if I slap the mace, you'll hear that annoying rattle that many people are familiar with chain maces. Now, why do people actually get chains on their maces? A lot of times it's tradition. Most ceremonial maces have chains wrapped around them, and a lot of drum majors want to maintain that tradition. Second of all, it actually adds grip and a little bit of more weight to your mace. So if you actually have a mace with chains on it, it does tend to spin a little bit faster because of the way it's weighted. Second of all, depending on where you get it, if you get a mace from Band Shop or Marching World like this one, it's mostly a freebie, maybe for an extra $10 or whatever. It's mostly a freebie. Sometimes they do sometimes it is an add-on, but most of the time it is freebie. You have the option of adding either chains or cords, and most people just go with chains because a lot of times it's actually, it looks a lot, I guess say classier, I guess. I mean, really, like I said, most people like to go with the traditional look of maces. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to be mostly concentrating around the Peacock American mace, because a lot of times those maces are a lot more easier to maintain, and a lot of times, gauging by my audience, I'm guessing that this is a lot of what maces you guys have. I mean, I might make a future video on chain maintenance on a Malacca mace, but a lot of people who are flourishing drum majors don't get chains on their maces. So we're going to look at my Peacock American mace. So my mace, like I said, has been through a lot. I actually have stretched these chains to the point that they are no longer, let me wait for my heater to turn on. So as you can see, it's actually pretty stretched. You can see it's actually got, you can actually see right there. I'm doing the beauty guru thing. You can actually see I've actually got some slack there, which that is really not what you don't want, but a lot of times that's unavoidable. So I'm gonna go ahead and, so I've actually modified my mace in a way, not really significantly, but you can see I've got some electrical tape here. A lot of times for me, what I do is I will wrap the mace end chains in electrical tape just to add a little bit more reinforcement in the mace chains. But you'll see in a bit why I put electrical tape there. All right, so here I'm gonna try not to hit the light. So as you can see, here is the bottom end of my mace. You can see that the screw or the hook that holds the mace is actually now pointing downward. When you first get your mace, and it's actually, when you first get these maces and they're brand new, this hook will actually be pointing up, and the chains will actually be tight on the mace. But let me go ahead and just loosen this. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these mace chains just to give you an idea of how much of these chains have stretched. So ideally, when you first purchase your mace, the mace, so you can see how loose my mace chains are. When you first purchase your mace, the hooks are actually going to be, as you can see, focus on the hook. So as you can see right here, this mace chain is actually really ridiculously stretched. The hook is actually technically supposed to be pointing up. That is ideal. This hook right here, see how it's pointing up? So when a mace chain is brand new, it would actually be looking more like, oh my goodness, see how loose this is? So when a mace chain is brand new, as you can see, it's supposed to look like this on the mace. However, my mace chains are that loose. So in order for you to tighten the mace chain, you actually have to, according to Marching World, they suggest that you tighten the mace chains from the bottom. So one of the tools that you will need to have is a Phillips head screwdriver, since the screws are Phillips screws, duh. So I have my Leatherman with a Phillips head screwdriver on here. So the way that you tighten these is you just lightly loosen the screw, just so you can get some movement in the hook. And usually what I do is, depending on which way the chain is going, I will follow that direction. So as you can see, the chain is going in this direction, so I will tighten it in that direction. So meaning, so it's going this way, I'm gonna move the screw back this way. So I'll go back this way, I'll tighten it a little bit that way, and I'll go ahead and I will tighten that screw. So I like to do one screw at a time. I don't like to do both screws. That's just my personal preference. And then so once I get that screw tightened, I'll go over here and I'll do the same thing. So as you can see, this chain is going in this direction. So I'll lightly loosen it and I'll move the chain in that direction to tighten it. And then once I feel it's tightened, I'll go ahead and tighten it. As you can see, it's not really perfect, but because as you can see, the hooks are now pretty much going 90 degrees and the chain has kind of shifted up. So that kind of presents an unfortunate factor with mace chains. So how I like to do it is I will try to get it as tight as possible, because as you can see, you still have all the slack right here. So even if I were to, even if I were to like take the link here and just choke it up on the shaft, and if I were to tighten each one again, you'll see that my mace chain the hooks are now pretty much pointing down, which means that they're pretty much past their limit of tightening. There's no way to tighten these chains anymore because over the years the links have stretched. These are just regular brass, and I think these chains are made of brass, but like over the years these chains have stretched. So my only solution would be just to either take off the chains or purchase a brand new chain altogether. But a lot of times that's not really an option for a lot of drum majors, because I understand these are expensive. So my thing that I like to do is I like to just go ahead and just get it as tight as possible as I can. So I'll go ahead and I'll tighten this screw over here as much as I can. Yeah, unfortunately that's as tight as I can get it. So right now, as you can see, now the hooks are now pointing in the opposite direction. As you can see right now, the hooks are now pointed in the opposite direction. So that's really the limit of the chains, of how much I can get the chains to be tightened. Because if I were to move the links up more, you can see I still got some slack in there. So the only way I can actually secure the chains is to use some electrical tape and to keep it tight tightened. So that is one way you can keep your chains tightened. Like I said, it really depends on the overall construction of your mace. These maces are, you can tighten them to the point of getting them back to when they were brand new, but like I said, there is a limit. If the mace chains have already stretched almost past the screw hole down here, you're not going to be able to get it tightened anymore. Second of all, if you have an older mace, like for example, this mace is almost 20 years old, the ferrule right here, if you drop it enough, it does tend to ride up on the shaft, so it will technically shorten. If I were to hold this mace up with a brand new mace, you'll see that it is actually visibly shorter, maybe by like an inch, half an inch. But just that one little inch itself from the bottom actually will make a difference in the overall tightness of your mace chain. So that's something to think about. Now if you have a different type of mace, like let's say a Premier mace, this one's a little bit more, I want to say easier, but not really. So this actually goes into the other type of maces, is the Premier mace and the wooden mace. So these maces are actually, the chains are, I want to say they're not really adjustable anymore. Once they reach the point of being stretched out, they're not going to be, you're not going to be able to get them back to their original tightness. The only way you're going to be able to actually tighten them is to maybe take out a link from one of these chains and then tighten it yourself, but you're gonna have to make sure that you do it evenly on both sides, because sometimes you're gonna end up with chains that are kind of lopsided. So that's something to consider, especially considering the way that the chains are attached to these maces. You'll see that they're actually attached with a ring and a collar, if you can see right there. So the way that I took my my chains off of this mace is I had to actually undo a link and then take the chains off, and that made it a little bit harder to actually maintain them, because once you take them off, you have to make sure you put them back on in the right way, and you have to use like with the Peacock mace, you have to use special tools, but you're gonna have to use like needle nose pliers, or maybe depending on like I said, the construction of the mace chain, you might have to use wire clippers or nippers. But like I said, do that. But that's something you're gonna have to do at your own risk. So for this video, I went over the overall construction, or not really construction, but the overall just maintaining your mace chains. If you have chains on your mace, especially these American maces, they will become loose over time. So when you're purchasing, if you still want to keep chains on your maces, a lot of times you're just going to have to find ways to actually keep the mace tightened. My personal recommendation, if you can, just take them off. A lot of times, most drum majors, especially later on, even though it's a freebie, most of the times they just take them off completely. I personally just like to spin either a black mace or a corded mace, but I like to keep the chains on just for overall looks. And overall, just do what you can to make sure that these chains don't mess up your overall performance. I have modified my mace. Many drum majors modify their maces all the time. So, like I said, it's all solely up to you how you want. Only you know how you want your mace to spin. So I hope this answered you guys' questions. Leave me a comment, let me know what you thought about this video. Consider subscribing to my channel. And as always guys, keep marching, keep flourishing. I'll catch you guys later. The way that this mace is